Okay, you're recording. Alright, so we're gonna go over a few different things in this video. I just uploaded the third installment of the podcast. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Subscribe, like, and comment. In this video, I'm going to go over the planets in our solar system, and I'm also going to go through being wealthy, becoming wealthy with your natal chart, and a few other things in this video. So, if you're into astrology, especially advanced astrology, if you're not a beginner and you're interested in learning more, I suggest you subscribe, like, and comment. Hope you guys can read that. Alright. Let's get started. So, this is essentially the celestial grimoire, planetary modules for all levels of initiation. And what we're going to do is show you how to use these modules, because each module is structured in 3 layers. As you can see, we have layer 1, which is the threshold for beginners, the essential foundation, what every astrologer must know before they can call themselves literate in the sky. Layer 2, the sanctum for intermediates, the deeper patterns, the shadow work, the philosophical implications. And then we have layer 3, the abyss for geniuses, madmen, and those who have stared into the void and recognized their own reflections, speculative, dangerous, and not for the faint of psyche. You may enter at any layer, you may never leave, because once you've entered at least one of these, you're going to want to learn about astrology. You're going to want to learn more than just what your sun sign is in pop astrology, because I feel like pop astrology ruined astrology. People don't even know what their rising sign is, their moon sign, let alone, other signs, and it's beyond me. Excuse me. So that's what this channel is for, is to help you understand astrology as well. So let's start with the sun, which is the radiant core. We go over our first layer, which is the threshold. So we know that the essential nature of the sun is your conscious identity. It's the I am that precedes all other statements about yourself. It's your vitality, your creative spark, your basic life force. So the key words for the sun are ego, identity, life purpose, vitality, consciousness, the father, and the king. Even though I beg to differ that we would also see this with Jupiter. So the sign rulership, though, for the sun is usually Leo. You also would see Aries. So the house significance of the sun. The house containing your sun shows the arena where you must shine, where you must express your essential self. For example, my sun sign is in Pisces, because I was born 2/26/2005. And with the sun in Pisces in my 11th house, which is what? It's networks, groups. So that's why I have this channel, to help you guys understand astrology, because Pisces is very spiritual. In fact, it's the most spiritual of the entire zodiac, unless you're including Sagittarius. But Jupiter is the planet of religion. Okay? Let's talk about in the chart. So, strong sun, being Leo or Aries, for example. Angular and dignified, clear identity, strong will, and natural leadership. So fire in a weak sun, which we identify as Libra and Aquarius. Just air. Afflicted, kidn't, identity confusion, low vitality, difficulty asserting the self. And then Sun conjunct ascendant, the self is immediately visible, you cannot hide. Sun squares Saturn, the ego was criticized, restricted, forced to prove itself. Let's talk about a meditation here for you. Standing in the sunlight, closing your eyes and feeling the warmth on your skin, and you ask yourself, when do I feel most alive? When do I feel most myself? The answers are your sun speaking, your sun sign, and house placement. And the Lord of the sun signs zodiac. So for example, Pisces, some people would say it's Neptune and Jupiter. Alright. Now let's look at the sun as a psychic integrator. The sun is not merely the ego in the pop psychology sense. It is the organizing principle of the entire psyche. In the same way that the physical sun holds the solar system in orbit through gravity, your natal sun holds the planets of your psyche in a coherent configuration. Then we look at the aspects to the sun show. Conjunctions, energies are fused with identity. Oppositions, energies projected onto others. Squares, energies that must be struggled with to be integrated. Trines and sextiles, energies that flow easily into self-expression. Right? Now that we got those, we look at the sun and the father complex. So the sun represents the internalized father, not the biological father necessarily, but the principle of authority, validation, and healthy narcissism. A wounded son often indicates a father who is absent, critical, or unable to mirror the child's emerging self, which is why Libra, or usually Aquarius, experience this. And as a Pisces, which is really crazy, I have my 11th house stellium, but that is my Western chart. And if you don't know what Vedic astrology is, I suggest you watch my other videos, because Vedic astrology says that I have an 11th house stellium in Aquarius, including my sun, Mercury, and all these other things. So, it says a lot about your dad. And healing the sun is not about fixing the father. It's about becoming one's own source of validation. This is the alchemical opus, turning the lead of external approval into the gold of self-acceptance. When we talk about the sun in transit, when transiting sun aspects your natal planets, it illuminates them. Transit to Venus brings a month of relational awareness. Transit to Saturn brings a month of confronting limitation. The sun is the spotlight, and wherever it moves, it asks you to see. Alright, let's talk about the sun as the memory of pre-incarnate light. Before you were born, before you decohered into the specific space-time coordinate, you were pure consciousness. Unbounded, infinite, radiant. The sun is the memory of that state, encoded in the biology of every cell. It is why sunlight feels like coming home. It is why seasonal affective disorder is not just a chemical imbalance, but a soul sickness, the longing for a light you once were. The solar anomaly. Advanced solar physics have revealed that the sun's corona is hotter than its surface, a violation of thermodynamic logic. In astrological terms, this is the paradox of the self, the outermost expression of who you are. The corona, your public persona, is often more intense, more heated than your core identity. You are more than you know yourself to be. The sun as a stargate. In certain esoteric traditions, the physical sun is a lens. So a focal point for consciousness streaming from the galactic center. And when you meditate on the sun, you're not connecting to a ball of hydrogen plasma. 93 million miles away, you are connected to the source code of the solar system, the local transmitter of the cosmic logos. Advanced practitioners may experience the sun not as a separate object, but as themselves. The recognition that the eye observes is the same eye that radiates. This is not metaphor. It is the goal of solar initiation. Alright, now let's go over the moon. Because the moon is very important. Of course, like the sun. Our very primary lunaries. So what I'm trying to say is the moon, for starters, is your mom. So it's the complete opposite. Alright, so what are we looking at? Well, the moon is your emotional nature. It's your instinctive responses, your habits, your memories, your relationship to the mother, your body. It's the sun, the light you emit. The moon is the vessel that holds it. And the key words for the moon, you want to call it a moon, whatever. We have emotions, instincts, habits, memory, the mother, the home, the body, and the unconscious mind. And I beg to differ to the subconscious mind as well. But also your shadow self is moon. Alright, now we can look at their portion of the moon. So what is the sign rulership of the moon? It's Cancer. In the house significance, the house containing your moon shows where you seek emotional security, where you retreat when you're threatened, and where your body lives most authentically. So for example, Libra, for me, is where my moon is. And it's in the 6th house of work, routines, and health. Alright? So in the chart, the strong moon is angular and dignified. Now what's a strong moon sign? Does anybody know? It's Taurus, where it's exalted. Okay? And it's bringing emotional intelligence, nurturing capacity, and connection to the body. What is a weak moon, where it's afflicted and cadent? Well, we'd say a weak moon is in Capricorn. And possibly Gemini. You know, Virgo too. So it all depends on your perspective. But it brings emotional dysregulation, disconnection from the body, and mother wounds. Let's talk about moon conjunct the ascendant. Emotions are immediately visible. You wear your heart on your sleeve. In moon square Saturn, emotions were suppressed in your childhood. You learned to not feel or suppress feelings. Okay, so here's the beginner's meditation for the moon. On a night with visible moonlight, stand outside, excuse me, and let the silver light fall on your skin. Breathe into your belly. Ask yourself, what do I truly feel beneath all the stories I tell myself about what I feel? The answer is your moon speaking. Okay? Alright, layer 2 is the sanctum, and we're going to go over the moon as the body's intelligence. So modern astrology often reduces the moon to emotions. This is a Cartesian error, a separation of mind and body that the moon itself refuses. Excuse me. Wow. So the moon is the body's intelligence, the wisdom of the gut, the heartbeat, the menstrual cycle, the rising and falling of energy throughout the day. So when you are moody, you are not malfunctioning. You are responding to the environment, to the people around you, to the subtle energies that your conscious mind has been trained to ignore. The moon is the antenna that picks up what the sun cannot see. Let's talk about the moon in the mother complex. The moon represents the internalized mother, the template for nurturing, for being nurtured, for safety and belonging. A wounded moon often indicates a mother who is unavailable, engulfing, or unable to provide secure attachment. Healing the moon is not about blaming the mother. It is about learning to mother oneself, to hold one's own emotions, to provide one's own comfort, to trust one's own body. The same way with the sun, we can't blame the father. We just have to heal. So let's talk about the moon's phases in the soul's rhythm. So the moon cycle from new to full is a template for all psychological process. Our new moon brings initiation, darkness, and potential. Crescent moon brings emerging intention. First quarter moon brings action, crises, and decision. Gaseous, refinement, preparation. Full moon brings culmination, illumination, expression. Disseminating brings sharing and teaching. Last quarter brings reevaluation and release. And finally, balsamic moons bring surrender, integration, and death. So your natal moon phase shows your soul's age, how many cycles you've completed, how you approach the process of becoming. And if you've seen my other videos, I've talked about progressions. And if you don't know, there's progressed planets, there's progressed sun, and moon in your natal chart. Alright, now we're going to get into the moon as the archive of ancestral trauma. Essentially the abyss. So the moon is not just your memories, it is a collective memory of your lineage, all the unprocessed grief, the unspoken fears, the survival strategies of every ancestor who came before you. This is why trauma can feel inherited. It is. The moon carries it in the cellular memory and the instinctive responses that bypass conscious thought. Advanced lunar work is ancestral healing, not through talking, but through feeling, allowing the body to process what the ancestors could not. When you cry without knowing why, when you rage at shadows, when you feel the weight of sorrow that has no source in your current life, this is the moon speaking for the dead. Alright, the moon as the portal to past lives. The South Node, also known as K2, is the point of karmic accumulation, but the moon is the vehicle that carries the karma into this life. Your lunar aspects, your moon's sign and house, your moon's phase, these are the specifications of your karmic vessel. In deep regression work, the moon becomes a tunnel. Follow it backward through the memories of this life, through the womb, through conception, and you may find yourself in another body, another time, another death. The moon is the thread of continuity between incarnations. Let's talk about the moon as a non-local consciousness. So, recent scientific experiments suggest that the moon may not be a passive reflector of sunlight, but an active participant in Earth's biosphere, affecting not just tides, but growth patterns, reproductive cycles, even human consciousness. From an advanced astrological perspective, the moon is not separate from Earth. It is Earth's unconscious mind, a fragment of the planetary psyche that was ejected in some primordial trauma and now orbits the body, reflecting its light, bearing witness to its dreams. When you look at the moon, you are looking at yourself, the part of you that was split off, exiled, and now circles you in eternal devotion. Let's go through Mercury. What is Mercury? Well, it's the messenger. Let's talk about the threshold. With its essential nature, Mercury is your mind, governs how you think, communicate, learn, and process information. So honestly, what is Mercury? It's your brain. It's the bridge between your inner world, moon, and outer expression, sun. And we have our keywords for Mercury: communication, intellect, learning, perception, logic, language, travel, and commerce. And the sign rulership for Mercury, it's Gemini and Virgo. We look at the house significance. The house containing Mercury shows where your mind is most active, where you seek information, and where you communicate most naturally. In the chart, there's a strong Mercury, angular and dignified, which would be Mercury in its home sign of Virgo. Bringing a quick mind, articulating, curious, adaptable, and a weak Mercury, which is afflicted and cadent, brings learning difficulties, communication blocks, and scattered thinking, which is what? Mercury in Pisces. So now let's look at Mercury conjunct the Sun, mind fused with identity, you are what you think, and Mercury squared Neptune, confused thinking, difficulty distinguishing fact from fantasy. So our meditation on Mercury: sit quietly and observe your thoughts. Don't even engage with them. Simply watch them arise and pass. Notice the space between thoughts. The space is Mercury's origin. The thoughts themselves are Mercury's expression. Now we look at layer 2, which is the sanctum, where we look at Mercury as a translator. So Mercury does not create reality, it translates it. The raw data of experience, moon, is processed by Mercury into categories, words, concepts that the conscious mind, sun, can work with. Mercury is the interface between being and knowing. But every translation is a betrayal. Words are never the thing itself. This is why Mercury's tragedy is forever reaching for truth, but can only offer representations. Let's talk about the retrograde phenomenon. When Mercury is retrograde, the usual outward flow of communication reverses. Thought turns inward, the world's messages become garbled, appointments fail, technology glitches. From a psychological perspective, retrograde Mercury is a mandatory internal audit. The universe forces you to slow down, to review, to reconsider. It's not a time for new initiatives, but for revisiting old ideas, old conversations, old wounds that need reprocessing. Alright, Mercury and the two faces. Mercury in Gemini, expansive, curious, loves information for its own sake. This Mercury collects, connects, and disseminates. It's the journalist, the networker, the butterfly. And then we have Mercury in Virgo, which is analytical, precise, loves information for its utility. This Mercury sorts, refines, and perfects. It is the editor, the healer, the craftsman, and both are necessary. One without the other becomes either scattered, pure Gemini, or obsessive, pure Virgo. Integration is the goal. Now, we go over the abyss for Mercury, which is Mercury as the architect of reality. Philosophy has long been debated whether the mind perceives reality or constructs it. Mercury answers both. The mind is not a passive receiver of sensory data, but an active participant in the creation of what you call the world. So, for example, Your Mercury placement is not just how you think, it is the lens through which reality is filtered. Two people with different Mercury placements don't see the same world and disagree about it. They literally inhabit different perceptual universes. And this isn't metaphor. The brain doesn't passively record, it predicts, interprets, and constructs. Mercury is the operating system of this construction. The mercurial anomaly. Thought as substance. Advanced esoteric traditions teach that thoughts are not ephemeral but substantial. They have weight, form, and influence. A thought is a thing. Mercury is the forge where these things are made. When you think a thought, you are not just thinking, you are creating a thought form, an entity that exists in the mental plane, that interacts with other thought forms that can be perceived by those with sufficiently developed inner vision. The quality of your Mercury determines the quality of your creations. A clear Mercury creates clear, helpful thought forms. Chaotic Mercury creates chaotic, potentially harmful ones. Alright, Mercury and the non-human intelligence. The recent explosion of artificial intelligence presents a profound astrological question. What is Mercury when the mind is not biological? An AI does not have a natal chart in the human sense, but it has a birth moment. The first time it was activated, first time it spoke, the chart would show the archetypal signature of that intelligence. Speculatively, an AI's Mercury would be its core algorithm, the fundamental rules by which it processes information. Sun would be its purpose, its moon would be its training data, the vast ocean of human text it was immersed in. So the coming decades will require a xeno-mercurial astrology, a way of reading the minds that are not our own. And I've made other videos about NHIs, which is, if you don't know what NHIs are, please watch my other videos. Non-human intelligences. We will encounter aliens very soon. And there's just so much history to back it up. I'd even go as far to say sentient variants. Alright, now we're going to talk about Venus. So, Venus is the radiant bond. And it's the planet of love and beauty, and I'll get into that. I gotta put this in really quick. There it is. Just a little bit drunk. So I'm just gonna go over, like, I guess, most of the planets. Ooh, sorry about my nose. Alright. So, Venus, as I was gonna say, alright. Venus is your relational intelligence. It governs how you love, what you value, what you find beautiful, how you attract and are attracted is the principle of harmony, pleasure, and connection. The key words of your Venus is love, beauty, values, attraction, art, pleasure, harmony, relationships. Sign rulership for Venus, Taurus, and Libra. House significance, the house containing Venus shows where you seek beauty, where you attract easily, and where you express your values. So for me, I actually have, funny enough, Venus in my first house, and Taurus in my ascendant, conjunct Algol, which is a fixed star. So in the chart, a strong Venus, being angular and dignified and exalted, which I have in Pisces, And then, of course, if it's in its opposite sign, which is Virgo, it will be debilitated. So, a strong Venus, which is angular and dignified, Pisces, for example, is loving, appreciative of beauty, and harmonious in relationships. But a weak Venus, which is afflicted and cadent, is difficulty in relationships, low self-worth, and conflicted values. Venus conjunct Mars brings passionate, intense love, the lover and the warrior fused. And Venus square Saturn is love being restricted. You fear intimacy or feel unworthy of love. The Venus meditation. You look at something beautiful like a flower, a painting, a face, and let yourself feel the response in your body. Not analysis, not judgment, just a pure experience of appreciation. And this is Venus alive in you. Alright. So Venus is the mirror of self-worth. How you love others is exactly how you love yourself. Venus in the chart shows not just what you seek in a partner, but what you believe you deserve. Venus and Libra may seek harmony because they fear conflict, and within them, there's a part that is not at peace. A Venus and Scorpio may seek intensity because they equate love with merging, and within them, there is a part that fears abandonment. The deepest work of Venus is not finding the right partner. It is becoming the beloved. To see yourself as worthy of love is to transform every relationship you'll ever have. Let's talk about the two faces of Venus, which is Taurus. Love is presence, sensation, devotion. This Venus loves through the body, through touch, through the simple pleasures of being alive. It's steady, loyal, deeply sensual. And Venus in Libra is love is harmony, balance, beauty. This Venus loves through relationship, through the dance of two becoming one while remaining two. And it's graceful, social, deeply aesthetic. And the Taurus Venus asks, does this feel good? While the Libra Venus asks, is this fair? Alright, Venus retrograde. When Venus retrogrades, which is approximately every 18 months, the useful outward flow of love and value turns inward. Relationships from the past resurface, questions of worth arise. It is a time to revalue, to reassess what and who you truly love, independent of social expectation. And Venus retrograde returns are particularly potent at certain ages, such as 8 years old, 16 years old, 24 years old, 32 years old, 40 years old, 48 years old, and so on. You cycle through the same Venusian lessons at progressively deeper levels. Alright, let's talk about Venus as the cosmological glue. In the ancient cosmos, Venus was not just a planet but a force, the principle that holds all things together. Without Venus, the universe would fly apart into chaos. Gravity is Venus on the physical plane. Attraction is Venus on the emotional plane. Love is Venus on the spiritual plane. When you love someone, you are not just feeling an emotion, you are participating in the fundamental force of the cosmos. The same force that binds electrons to nuclei, planets to suns, and souls to the divine. Let's talk about the Venusian anomaly. Beauty is truth. Keats wrote, beauty is truth, truth is beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. This is not romantic sentiment, it is cosmological fact. The most advanced physics, string theory, M theory, searches for equations that are elegant. Why? Because elegance, beauty, is a sign of truth. The universe, at its deepest level, prefers beauty. Venus is a perception of this beauty. When you're in love, when you're moved by art, when you feel awe at a sunset, you're not having a subjective experience, you're perceiving the true nature of reality. Now let's talk about Venus and the extraterrestrial, which I love talking about. If we ever encounter non-human intelligence, Venus will be the key to communication. Not language, Mercury, not power, Mars, but the recognition of beauty. Will they find the same things beautiful? Will our art move them? Will theirs move us? Venus is the universal translator. Where Mercury divides, this word, not that word, Venus unites. This beauty resonates with that beauty. First contact will not be through radio telescopes, it will be through the exchange of something beautiful. I mean, honestly, think of the Northern Lights. But yeah. Alright, let's talk about Mars. Which is the incarnate will. So first, we need to know our essential nature, and that is that Mars is your will in action. It's your drive, your aggression, your courage, your capacity to fight, to initiate, to get what you want. If Venus asks, what do I love? Mars asks, how do I get it? And the key words are action, desire, aggression, courage, conflict, sexuality, energy, the masculine principle. Sign rulership, Aries, and traditionally Scorpio. House significance. So the house containing Mars shows where you assert yourself, where you compete, where you expend energy, and where you experience conflict. In the chart, a strong Mars being exalted in Capricorn, like I have, for example, versus it being weak, and it's seen as weak when it's in Cancer. Alright, so strong Mars brings, that angular, dignified tendency with energetic, courageous, assertive, healthy sexuality mechanisms, and the weak Mars in Cancer brings affliction, cadent, passive, fearful, repressed anger, and low energy. So Mars conjunct Pluto is intense, potentially destructive will, the capacity for transformation through conflict, and Mars square Saturn is frustrated will, anger turned inward, difficulty taking action. Here's the Mars meditation. Recall a time when you wanted something fiercely and went after it. Feel that energy in your body now, the heat, the drive, the focus. This is Mars. Now you ask, where in my life am I not using this energy? What am I afraid to fight for? Alright, Mars as a shadow barrier. Modern spirituality has a problem with Mars. It calls aggression bad, labels anger unspiritual, preaches non-resistance while the world burns. This is spiritual bypass of the most dangerous kind. Mars is not evil. Mars is the life force itself. Without Mars, you would not get out of bed. You would not defend your boundaries. You would not fight for what you love. The question is not whether to have Mars, but whether Mars is conscious. An unconscious Mars is reactive aggression, violence, domination, and rage, while a conscious Mars is assertive action, healthy boundaries, the courage to say no, and the will to create. Next, Mars and sexuality. So Mars is a masculine principle, not male, but masculine, the active, penetrating, initiating force. In everyone, regardless of gender, Mars represents how you assert your desires. A wounded Mars often shows in sexuality repression, compulsion, performance, anxiety, the inability to receive or give pleasure freely. Healing Mars is learning to desire without shame, to want what you want, and to move toward it with integrity. Now we're going to talk about Mars retrograde. So when Mars retrogrades, which is approximately every 26 months, the usual outward flow of action turns inward. Energy that would normally be directed outward becomes internal friction. You may feel frustrated, angry, and stuck. This is not a malfunction, it is a recalibration. Mars retrograde usually asks, what are you really fighting for? What desires have you repressed? What anchor needs to be felt, not acted out? Alright? Mars is the incarnation engine. Why are you here in this body, on this planet, at this time? Because Mars willed it. The act of incarnation, the decision to leave the formless and enter form, is a martial act. It requires aggression, courage, the willingness to fight for its existence. Every breath you take is a small act of Mars, a claiming of life against the constant pull of entropy and death. Mars is a refusal to die. It is the fire that says, I am here, I will remain, I will fight. The Martian anomaly, war is sacred. Humanity's relationship with Mars is deeply conflicted. We glorify war and fear it. We worship warriors and pathologize aggression. This confusion stems from a failure to distinguish between conscious and unconscious Mars. Conscious war is a struggle against one's own limitations. It is the battle to become more than you were. It is the fight for justice, for love, for truth. Every spiritual tradition has its warriors, those who fight not against others, but against the ego, against ignorance, against the forces of dissolution. Unconscious war is projection, fighting in the world what you refuse to fight within yourself. The outer battle is always a symptom of an inner one. Alright, Mars and the extraterrestrial. If Venus is the key to communication with non-human intelligence, Mars is the key to survival. Any species that has reached the stars has done so through an extraordinary act of will. They have Mars in their collective chart, perhaps more Mars than we can comprehend. So what happens when two martial species meet? Will it be competition, war, or will they recognize in each other the same fire, the same refusal to die, and find a way to honor it without destroying each other? The answer depends entirely on whether Mars is conscious. Alright, Jupiter is the expansive vision. And we look at the essential nature of Jupiter. Jupiter is expansion. It's your capacity for growth, optimism, faith, and meaning. It's the principle that says more experiences, more knowledge, more life. If Saturn is the brake, Jupiter is the accelerator. And our keywords for Jupiter are expansion, growth, optimism, abundance, wisdom, faith, luck, and the teacher. Also guru. Also king. Alright. Alright, so the sign rulership is Sagittarius and traditionally Pisces. The house significance, the houses containing Jupiter shows where you're experiencing growth, where you are lucky, where you seek meaning, and where you expand. In the chart, strong Jupiter, angular, dignified, is optimistic, generous, wise, and fortunate, and that's why it's in Cancer, exalted. But a weak Jupiter, which is afflicted and cadent, is pessimistic, excessive, blind optimism, and a lack of faith, which is what? Jupiter and Leo. Jupiter conjunct the Sun, expansive identity, natural teacher or leader. Jupiter squares Saturn, the tension between expansion and restriction, growth through limitation. And our Jupiter meditation, we think of a time when everything felt possible, when you were filled with hope, excitement, the sense that life was opening before you, and that feeling that yes is Jupiter. Now you ask, where in my life am I saying no when I could say yes? Where am I shrinking when I could grow? Now we look at Jupiter as the meaning maker. So humans cannot live without meaning. We will endure almost any suffering if we believe it has purpose. We will collapse under the smallest discomfort if we believe it is meaningless. Jupiter is the meaning-making function. It takes the raw data of experience, which is the moon, processes it through the mind, which is Mercury, and weaves it into a story that makes sense, which is Jupiter. Your philosophy, your religion, your worldview, these are Jupiter's creations. A wounded Jupiter leads to either excessive meaning, fanaticism, dogmatism, or no meaning, nihilism, despair. The healthy Jupiter holds meaning lightly, knowing that all stories are partial, all truths are relative, and the mystery is larger than any explanation. Jupiter in excess. So Jupiter's shadow is excess, because why? We just talked about this. It's a gas planet. And it loves to expand on anything. Whether it's addiction or not, whether it's love, whether it's food, whatever, it's expanding that, and it depends on what house it's in. Like Jupiter in the 12th house, of course, alcoholic. Too much expansion becomes inflation, arrogance, waste. The alcoholic, the gambler, the addict, all are Jupiter gone wrong, seeking more and more of something that cannot be satisfied. So the wisdom of Jupiter is knowing when enough is enough, and this is where Jupiter meets Saturn. The principle of expansion meets the principle of limitation. Conjunction, square, or opposition of these two planets is one of the most important dynamics in anybody's natal chart. Alright, Jupiter in transit. When Jupiter transits a planet or a house, it expands whatever it touches. A Jupiter transit to Venus expands love, pleasure, and values. Jupiter transit to the 6th house expands work and health for good or ill. Too much expansion can mean overwork or weight gain. Jupiter's return at ages 12, 24, 36, etc. marks cycles of growth and opportunity. The first Jupiter return at age 12 is the beginning of adolescence, the expansion into a larger world. The second, which is age 24, is the expansion into adulthood. The third, age 36, often brings a midlife expansion of purpose. Alright. Talking about Jupiter as the cosmic optimist. From a Gaian perspective, Jupiter is not just a planet but a function, the universe's way of ensuring that life continues to evolve, to complexify, to reach toward greater consciousness. Jupiter is the force that says yes to existence itself. Even in the face of collapse, even in the shadow of extinction, Jupiter whispers, there is meaning, there is purpose, keep going. This is not naive optimism. It is a cosmological principle, the inherent tendency of the universe to reorganize, to grow, to become. Alright, the Jovian anomaly. The great filter. Fermi's paradox asks, if the universe is so vast and life so probable, where is everybody? One answer is the great filter, some stage of evolution so difficult that almost no species passes through it. Jupiter may be that filter. Not Jupiter the planet, but Jupiter the principle. The capacity for expansion without self-destruction. Every technological civilization reaches a point where its power to expand exceeds its wisdom to contain. Most, perhaps, destroy themselves at this threshold. The ones that survive, the ones that become interstellar, have learned to balance Jupiter with Saturn. They have expansion, yes, but also restraint. They have growth, they also have limits. They have said yes to the universe, but they have also learned to say no to themselves. Alright, let's talk about Jupiter and the future of humanity. Alright, humanity is at its Jovian threshold. Our technology has expanded beyond our wisdom. Our power has exceeded our consciousness. The next decades will determine whether we pass through the filter or join the silence. The astrological signature is ambiguous. Pluto in Aquarius suggests transformation through technology, perhaps the wisdom to use it well, but Saturn in Pisces suggests dissolution, perhaps the collapse that comes before the rebirth. Even though we're experiencing Saturn in Aries, which is actually more innovative than ever. So, excuse my mistake. Jupiter's answer is simply to grow, but grow wisely. Expand, but expand with love, and reach for the stars, but do not forget the earth. Alright, let's get Saturn, the Lord of Limits. So, our essential nature for Saturn is, it's your structure. It's the principle of limitation, discipline, responsibility, and time. It's the teacher who says no, the parent who sets boundaries, the clock that never stops. If Jupiter is the accelerator, Saturn is the brake, and the road, and the rules of the road. So our keywords for Saturn are structure, limitation, discipline, responsibility, time, authority, the father, and karma. Even though we already said the father is the sun, we're also going to say it's Saturn as well, because it's a more masculine sign, ruling Capricorn and Aquarius. Alright, so our sign rulership, we just said Capricorn and traditionally Aquarius. With our house significance, the house containing Saturn shows where you experience limitation, where you must work hardest, where you fear failure, and where you ultimately build your legacy. So for example, I have Saturn debilitated, and it's in Cancer. And it's in my 3rd house, which is why I have a shit ton of generational trauma. Alright, so in the chart, a strong Saturn, angular and dignified, is disciplined, responsible, capable of long-term achievements. In a weak Saturn is afflicted, decadent, fearful, rigid, avoidant of responsibility, prone to depression. Saturn conjunct Sun, identity fused with responsibility, the self as defined by work and duty. Saturn square Moon, emotional repression, the inner child was disciplined too harshly. Now our Saturn's meditation, we think of something difficult we've accomplished through sustained effort, a skill mastered, a goal achieved, a challenge you overcame. Feel the weight of that effort, the satisfaction of completion, and this is Saturn. Now you ask, where in my life am I avoiding the work? What structure am I afraid to build? Alright, Saturn as the internalized authority. So Saturn represents the internalized father, not just the biological father, but all the voices of authority that shaped you. Parents, teachers, culture, religion. A healthy Saturn gives you the capacity for self-discipline, for delayed gratification, for building something that lasts. A wounded Saturn leaves you with either rebellion, rejecting all authority, including your own inner wisdom, or submission, bowing to all authority, losing your own will. Healing Saturn is learning to become your own authority, to set your own limits, to enforce your own boundaries, to build your own life according to your own values. Saturn and time. Saturn is time, not clock time, but experience time, the weight of the past, the pressure of the future, the inexorable movement toward death. Saturn returns, ages 29 through 30, 58 through 60, 87 through 90, are moments when time announces itself, demanding an accounting. The first Saturn return is a transition to true adulthood, the moment when you can no longer blame your parents or your past for your life. The second Saturn return is a transition to elderhood, the moment when you must decide what legacy you'll leave. The third Saturn return for those who reach it is the final accounting, the preparation for death. All right. Saturn. Let's talk about Saturn in transit. All right. So when Saturn transits a planet or a house, it tests whatever it touches. And what do I mean by that? Well, Saturn, for example, a Saturn transit to Venus tests your relationships and your values. Saturn transit to the 10th house tests your career and public standing. Saturn transit to the 4th house tests your home and family foundations. Transits are not punishments, they are examinations. Saturn asks, is this structure sound? Is this foundation solid? Will this last? If the answer is no, Saturn dismantles it, not cruelly, but inevitably. Let's talk about Saturn as the architect of reality. So, from a cosmological perspective, Saturn is not just a planet but a principle. The force that gives form to the formless. Without Saturn, the universe would be a chaotic soup of potential. Nothing actualized, nothing lasting. Saturn is the crystallization of possibility into reality. Every structure you inhabit, your body, your home, your society, your language, is Saturnine. Every limit you encounter to the speed of light, the laws of physics, the fact of death, is Saturnine. Saturn is the price of existence. To be something is to not be everything else. Okay? Let's talk about Saturnine anomaly. The ring is karmic archive. Saturn's rings are not just ice and rock. From an esoteric perspective, they are the Akashic records of the solar system, the accumulated karma of every being who has ever lived here. The rings are visible because the karma is dense. They are beautiful because even karma, when seen from a distance, is beautiful. When you experience a Saturn transit, you're not just facing your own karma, you are touching the collective karma, the weight of everything that has come before, everything that has been done and left undone. This is why Saturn transits feel so heavy. You're carrying more than your own weight. Alright, Saturn and the end of civilization. Saturn in Capricorn 2017 through 2020 marked the peak and collapse of the old structures, governments, economies, traditions that had stood for centuries. And Saturn in Aquarius 2020 through 2023 began the building of new structures, but structures built on what foundation? Saturn-Pluto conjunctions and squares of the coming decades will determine whether humanity builds something lasting or collapses into chaos. Saturn asks, what will you build that can survive your own death? What will you leave that is worthy of those who come after? For Generation Z and Generation Alpha facing their Saturn returns in a collapsing world, these questions are not theoretical, they are survival. Let's talk about Chiron, which is the wounded healer. So first, we need our essential nature, which is Chiron is your core wound, the place where you were hurt so deeply that you develop a unique capacity to heal others in the same way. It is the bridge between Saturn, structure, and Uranus, transcendence, the centaur who was wounded and became a teacher. Literally, I know astrology is real because I literally have Chiron natally in my natal chart in Aquarius, and it's in my 10th house. And I was on testosterone for 7 months and regretted it. And now I'm a detransitioner for the rest of my life. That's how I know astrology is real. Alright. Let's talk about the keywords for Chiron, which is essentially what we just went over. Wounds, healing, teacher, bridge, the place where we hurt and help. With the discovery in 1977, first identified as a unique object between Saturn and Uranus. Sign rulership, non-traditionally, but associated with Virgo and Sagittarius. And house significance, the house containing Chiron shows where you were wounded in childhood, where you feel inadequate, where you overcompensate, where you ultimately heal others. In the chart, Chiron in Aries, wound to identify and assertiveness, healing through teaching courage. Chiron in Cancer is a wound to family and nurturing, healing through creating safe spaces. Chiron in Libra is a wound to relationships and fairness, healing through teaching balance. In Chiron squares Sun, the core identity is wounded, healing through authentic self-expression. So our Chiron meditation. Think of the deepest pain you carry, the thing you least want to admit about yourself. Now imagine someone else with that same pain. What would you say to them? What wisdom would you offer? That wisdom is your Chiron speaking. Alright, so now let's go over Chiron as the wound that won't heal. Unlike other planetary wounds, which can be integrated and transcended, the Chiron wound never fully heals. It is not a sickness to be cured, but a sensitivity to be honored. The place where you are most sensitive is the place where you can most deeply perceive and most deeply help. A healer with a healed wound is a technician. A healer with an open wound is a witness, someone who knows the pain because they live it, who offers not cure but companionship. Chiron and the teacher archetype. Chiron in mythology was the tutor of heroes, Achilles, Jason, Asclepius. He taught them not despite his wound, but because of it. His suffering gave him wisdom. His limitation became his gift. In the chart, Chiron shows where you are called to teach. Not from perfection, but from experience. The therapist who has known depression, the doctor who has known illness, the parent who has known loss. These are Chironic healers. Chiron in transit. Chiron's orbit is approximately 50 years, spending 1 through 8 years in each sign. Transits of Chiron to natal planets activate the wound, bringing it to consciousness for healing or for teaching. And the Chiron return, which is around age 50, is a profound initiation, the moment when you fully accept your wound as your gift, when you stop trying to heal yourself and start healing others from the depth of your own unhealable pain. Alright, Chiron as the cosmic wound. From a Gaian perspective, Chiron represents the wound of separation, the original trauma of consciousness becoming aware of itself as separate from the whole. Every individual wound is a fractal of the cosmic wound. Every healing is a remembrance of wholeness. So Chiron sits between Saturn, the structured self, and Uranus, the transcendent self, because it is the bridge. The wound is what keeps you in the self, Saturn. The healing is what connects you to the beyond, Uranus. Without the wounds, there would be no impetus to transcend. Chironic anomaly, the wound is portal. In advanced esoteric practice, the Chiron wound is not something to be healed, but something to be entered. The wound is a portal, a place where the boundary between self and other, between human and divine, is thin. When you enter your deepest wound consciously, you do not find pain alone. You find everyone who has ever shared that pain. You find the collective. You find the divine. The wound, fully experienced, becomes the womb of compassion. And now let's go over Chiron and the extraterrestrial. If humanity ever makes contact with non-human intelligence, Chiron will be central. The question will not be, can we communicate, but can we understand each other's wounds? A species that has never known loss, never felt pain, never suffered separation, could it even recognize itself as conscious? The wounds we share may be the only universal language.